We are so pleased tonight to welcome Rudy Salas, who is running, as you know, for Congress in California's 22nd Congressional District. Rudy was born and raised in the Central Valley. He graduated from UCLA and returned home, where he was the first Latino ever to be elected to Bakersfield City Council. He served for 10 years in the California State Assembly, and then last year took on the goal of unseating Republican David Valadao in the newly configured District California 22. Rudy came very close. As Patty said, he lost by just a little over 3,000 votes in a year that saw poor Democratic turnout throughout California, and especially in our key purple districts. Fortunately, Rudy declared his candidacy again earlier this year, and he's going to be working hard to flip California 22 blue. Please join me in welcoming Rudy Salas.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I appreciate everything that you do, and thank you for setting this up. You know, it's great to be with Democrats. It's great to be with all of you. I tell people, you know, it was a tough election cycle last year, not just for me, but for all Californians and really for the country. You know, we really did we were fighting really hard to keep the House. And, you know, the best thing I tell people about Democrats and about activists is, you know, we don't just go to a corner and lick our wounds. What we do is we lace up our shoes and we double our efforts, right? It's doing the things that you guys are saying, like, okay, what did we learn? What do we have to do? How do we get this ball rolling, kind of moving forward for the next year, for the next cycle? So, you know, we're 120 days out from the primary election. A lot sooner if you start counting backwards from February 6th, when people can actually start voting. But just by way of background, for those of you that aren't familiar with me, my name is Rudy Salas. I was born and raised right here in the Central Valley. All public schools. I tell people I grew up in Bakersfield and in Delano. I actually went to schools in both. But, you know, as a kid growing up, my parents didn't have too much, but my dad used to run a crew out in the fields. And when somebody didn't show up, I used to take that person's job for the day. And when everybody did, I helped my dad do his job for the day. And so that's kind of how I made some extra money to pay for things like school shoes and backpacks and my school supplies. But like I said, graduated all public schools, graduated from UCLA, had 2 jobs in college, just kind of worked my way through. First job after college, after UCLA, was working at the White House. Worked for the Office of the Vice President, did financial work out of all things, not even political stuff. And then after that election, came back home, worked as a counselor at the local university with the TRIO programs, Upward Bound, Migrant Scholars Program, ran their summer program, got kids into college from the local areas. And so when I did venture back into politics and ran, actually, you know, a lot of folks and a lot of families in a lot of my small cities and the different high schools in different communities. And so that was great. But worked for my local state senator, then ran for city council. And I remember when I ran for city council, people were like, Rudy, you're too young. Hispanic has never won. Why do you think you're going to do it? There's been, you know, so much effort here, and there's like 7 candidates. And so I ran anyways. It was home. It was the area I grew up in. Ended up winning by double digits. People had faith in me, and, you know, we did good things here locally. With our parks and with our streets and with public safety and making sure that kids had, you know, safe spaces, and they had places to go and actually have activities during the summer and whatnot. And so ran for city council, then redistricting happened, had an opportunity to run for the assembly, ran for the state legislature, was there for 10 years, 10 incredible years, where we've been able to just move the needle on so many things. A few months ago, I did a ribbon cutting for a multi-story building at our local community college, a learning center, which I'm very proud of. And then, you know, I spoke at a graduation for our nurses where, you know, the director was telling me, Rudy, the money you were able to get us helped double the graduating size for the nurses for the next decade. And so, you know, those types of things make me very proud of the work that we've been able to do, but really also reminds me of like how much need continues to be out there, how much more that we need to continue to keep pushing for. And so we know that as a Democrats, one of our core values is obviously access to healthcare, and making sure that we have not only our nurses and our doctors, and I tell people it's all the way through, it's all our healthcare professionals, our phlebotomists, all the way through that. We need to make sure that we're meeting those needs. And so in the legislature, one of the things that we did was actually grow healthcare to cover over 93% of Californians. And so, you know, we helped on that front, but also I tell people at the end of the day, guys, this is really about people. This is about families. This is about not just families here in the Central Valley or families here in California, but families across the entire country. And so when we look at just what's happening, not just just a couple of months ago and a couple of weeks ago, we don't even have to go that far back. And when you look at some of the proposals, whether it was Kevin McCarthy at the time putting proposals that are cutting veteran services, cutting, to me, which was egregious, was like Meals on Wheels for seniors. Like, really? Are you really going to cut that program? That's not who we are as people. And when you look at these cuts that they continue to do, and my opponent just continues to keep supporting all of these things, I just don't understand how the other side can think that these are good things for Americans and for Californians. And so when you look at, the Republicans, when they failed to want to cap like the price of insulin, for instance. I represent an area with high diabetes, and we have diabetes in every county in our state, and it's such a prevalent problem across the entire country. But when the Republicans failed to cap the price of insulin so that people could get their life-saving medications, like, that's egregious to me, right? And that's one of the reasons why I left the legislature to run for Congress, because we need to make sure that we control the House so that we can protect our families back home, and we can protect Americans across the entire country. And so, those are the reasons that motivate me, that continue to, get me fired up and continue to keep fighting. We know that these elections are not easy. I always have people joke with me like, oh my God, politics is so crazy. Why do you want to do this? And then I get other people like, oh my God, I'm so glad that there's good people like you running. We need good people in Congress right now, because they see all the headlines and they see all the craziness happening. And so, and I hear it from my family as well. And they have faith in what we can do together, because at the end of the day, I tell people, I live by a very simple philosophy, and it's a philosophy that I've had in my office, and my staff knows this. It's very simple. Do the most amount of good for the most amount of people. Very simple, but it's just kind of our guiding light. And so whether it's like capping the price of insulin for people with diabetes, or whether it's just going out and having a community cleanup. I remember during the pandemic, for instance, like, we got calls from so many nonprofit organizations because we knew that there was huge needs, for instance, for like our food drives, and for people coming through in their cars to get PPE, to get masks, to get all the equipment that they need, and plus food, right? And so, but at that time, people were scared to volunteer. And so, I was out there myself, all geared up, and all my PPE, and then my staff that, was all volunteer. Didn't make them come, but if you wanted to join me, we were there, right, to do those types of things. Because I tell people, you got to be able to roll up your sleeves and to be out there. And I continue to also say that one of the best compliments that I continue to receive is that no matter which community I'm in, whether it's one of my rural areas or one of my big cities, people always come to me and say, Rudy, you're from here. You're one of us. You're one of us. When I hear that you're one of us, like, to me, that just warms my heart, because they're like, we see you all the time. Like, you gave my kid a backpack, or you brought like coats for the kindergarten class in the winters, because, it gets really cold, and there's some families that this is an added, it's a hardship that they don't have to endure, because we're there to actually help with our community partners. And so, it's about having the right heart to do the right thing, but then being able to have the team around you to execute that. And so not just on the policy side or the community front, right, even on the political side, is now how do we translate this to get people involved, to get them to understand, like, hey, who your representative is matters to you and your family. And this is why, right? And we could go through those policy issues. We could go through insulin. We could go through healthcare. We could go through, all the cuts that they're just doing right now in Congress. And we know that we're going to continue to see some interesting stuff from the Speaker Johnson and my opponent, Mr. Valadao, and some of the others. Like, we just know that they're not going to have our families as a priority. We know that we need to continue to keep fighting for them and call them out on it, call them out for these votes. And so I was so happy to see a lot of Democrats and grassroots organizations. And we actually had some folks down from the Bay Area this past weekend handing out these simple flyers from the state party that was calling them out for some of the egregious things that they're doing. And so letting people know early and engaging them early to let them know, like, look, this is happening now, right? This isn't something a year, 2, 3, 5, 10 years. No, this is happening right now. And so it's just trying to get people to understand before all the political ads and everything else, like, look, this is what's happening, so that when the election comes around, that they don't take it with a grain of salt, thinking like, well, I don't know if that's true or not. And this way, by engaging with them early, we're telling them, like, look, this is happening now, before all the political spins and stuff. These are just the facts. And I find that when you give people the facts and you give them the information, it actually helps them start questioning, like, okay, why is this happening? What's going on? And then we give them the information where they can look it up on C-SPAN or on the internet to find the actual votes, to see for themselves, like, okay, this actually is happening. They're not just, trying to sell me some snake oil or something. But, I find that that's been very effective. And so, when we talk about, well, what do we need to do now? How do we engage those folks? Well, we need to engage everybody, whether it's younger voters, right? And we talk about student debt, or whether it's older voters and we talk about the attacks. Like, we know Speaker Johnson wanted to change Social Security the way we know it, right? Like, he wants to do away with a lot of those programs. And so it's like telling people, like, look, this is what's happening to you. This is what's happening to your family. This is what they want to do for your future if they're younger voters, right? And trying to draw those ties together. And so, I tell people I'm only one person, but, I want to be at the table to help fight for our families, fight for Californians, fight for Americans, fight for our values. But at the end of the day, it's going to take all of us, right? This was the closest flip in the entire state. And I think we were the second closest flip in the entire country, right, to winning this seat. We just had a very, very historically low turnout. And I tell people, it was raining on election day. People were, dissuaded because of gas prices and national inflation and all this different stuff. But we have to find ways to break through all of that noise, to let people know, like, look, this is why this matters to you. And then I tell people the fight is getting the ballot, especially vote by mail, from the kitchen table to the mailbox, right? Somehow getting it from that kitchen table, that 20 steps to the mailbox, is where the fight is. And so, I tell people, if we're waiting until GOTV the last 4 days, that's a very tough road to haul. We got to be out there as soon as those ballots are hitting, getting people to turn them in, driving them to the polls if they need those rides, back on February 6th, not on GOTV in March. It's right when they get those ballots in their hands. And so I think that's where our effort needs to be. That's where we need to be focused. And we're engaged in this fight and early. This is like the earliest we've ever engaged. And, I know that they've done 50,000 calls into the district. And like I said, they've been walking this past weekend. They walked weekends prior. And so it's just going to take all of us to do that. On the campaign front, I do want to let you guys know that I do have some good news to share with everybody. Governor Gavin Newsom is formally endorsed us now. And he sent out like a fundraising email for us. And so that did pretty well. And so we're very grateful for him. But, we have a ton of the statewide, Lieutenant Governor Eleni, Rob Bonta, Tony Thurman, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, the new leadership in Congress with Catherine Clark and Pete Aguilar, and I think we're at 70 or 80 folks that have already now endorsed and kind of jumped on board because they believe in our mission and what we're trying to do. And really at the end of the day, it's us working together to make life better for all Californians and really for all Americans. And so I just appreciate you guys having me on board, and I look forward to any questions you might have. But really, for us to kind of roll up our sleeves and get this done and make this happen, because we could win this majority through California. We don't know like what the other states are doing, and we know that there's down in the South, they're challenging things in the court. And so, but we can win these 5 seats. I know you guys have identified 6. If we get these 6 seats here in California, we don't need to worry about anybody else. We could just control it here.
Perfect. That's a perfect segue. Rudy, thank you so much. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's completely our focus, and couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that we're doing, and you're also right, what we're really working on here is getting activists to know you better and to know the district better, and to hopefully get excited and be in it for the long haul to get us across the finish line, and especially to get all of our candidates across the finish line this time around. To that end, can you tell us a little bit about California 22? What should activists understand about the district? What do we need to know?
Yeah, I tell people this district just kind of has that, when you look at its population, it's pretty big, and we have like big cities and small cities, but it's kind of that small city mentality where people just want to trust you and take you for your word. So like a handshake, it's like that old handshake kind of, you do right by me, I do right by you, you watch out for your neighbors. But once you gain that trust, like that's what it's all about, because people will trust you as a person more than they will for like your political labels or any other labels that you might have. It's really about just getting to know you as an individual. And so if you can break that barrier, like I told you guys, I shared the story about in my rural areas, people are like, oh, Rudy, you're from here, you're one of us, even though they know I don't live and their community. They're like, oh no, but you're always here, you're one of us, right? It's once you can break that and transcend that, then I think that's where you can have those honest, real discussions, so that when they see something in the media or they see some super PAC doing some ad, that they trust you to tell them what the truth is, right? And I've been telling people, so much money is being spent on politics these days, ever since Citizens United decision was ruled, that to me, what I'm starting to see and notice is that, the other side has a ton of money. We know this. But now I almost feel like they use all that money to shove in all this negative ads and all these just straight out lies, right, on all of our candidates. And it's a form of voter suppression, right? They're trying to get the voter to say, well, I don't know. And there's so much, crap out there that I don't know what's going on, and I'm just not going to do it. And I'm like, and when I tell people this, I say, that's exactly the way they want you to feel. Don't let them win. And then they're like, oh yeah, no, why am I going to let them do that to me? Right. And I'm like, yes, get your ballot in, like, let's fill it out right now. That's what it's going to take. But getting people to understand, like, that's what they're trying to do to you. They're trying to get you not to vote, right? And so we know that democracy is best served with more people participating. And in this district, we know that the higher the voter turnout, the better it is for Democrats, the better it's going to be for our candidacy, but really just for Democrats in general. And I say for democracy, the more people that are involved, the better it is for all of us.
Got it. So the district is really runs on personal connection, is one of the things that I'm hearing. And and I love the fact that you're kind of naming the tactic and saying, here's what they're trying to do. Let me, dispel the fog for you. If you're confused, they're winning. If you're, deciding to sit it out, they're winning. You mentioned you came really close to beating Valadao last time. What's the trick that's going to get you across the finish line this time? What do you need to do to beat them?
It's getting that turnout, getting that voter engagement, getting that turnout. Getting people to turn their ballots in earlier is really going to be the key. We know that if all historical voting trends hold true, in a presidential year, we know more people vote, and we can win this. If we ran the same election last time with presidential year turnout, we would be over the finish line. Right now, that's not to say that we should be doing our work. We definitely have to be doing our work, and we have to be engaged and, obviously not have any big mess ups in the campaign, but it's really about just letting people know, like, look, it really does matter that you vote. And what we could say is, this election came down to a couple of votes for every neighborhood last time. Had we had 2 more people vote in every neighborhood, we would have flipped this seat. Like, it really does come down to you and your family. It comes down to you and your kids voting, you and your uncle, your aunts, your cousins. Like, if you guys vote, like, things change. And so we have to fight that voter apathy, like, oh, my vote doesn't count. And I'm like, no, 2 votes counts. It makes a difference. And especially when you look at the municipal level and you look at our local bond measures or school board races, like, they're decided by less than 12 votes, less than 5 votes sometimes. We've had some that have been as little as 5 vote differences. Like, it does matter, like, and letting people know, like, look, it does make a difference. It really does. And so our job is to convince people, to let them know, like, to get through that apathy, to get through all the negative ads, to let them know, like, look, you do matter, your voice matters, and how you want your community for yourself and for your kids and for your family. Like, that's why you need to vote, because this is why we all are in it. We're all in it to make a better society and a better community for our entire neighborhood, for our entire community, and for our families.
Got it. So really giving them the sense of the power of their vote and the effects that they can have, even though they may not believe it at this point. One of the things that we've heard when Patty mentioned, we talked to a number of candidates. I mean, you and I spoke last year in the interviews, but then we did some debriefs after the election as well. And one of the things we heard over and over was it's really important to define your opponent early. And Valadao's been a little slippery, right? I mean, he voted to impeach Trump the second time around, likes to pretend he's got a little bit of distance, but then votes with McCarthy, Johnson, whoever it is this week. He's voting with them all the time. What are you doing? What do you need to do to define him or to dislodge, the opinion that people may have of him now and kind of show him in his true colors?
Yeah, I think it's doing things like we did this weekend, actually showing his votes. So he'll say one thing on TV or in the district, but he's doing the exact opposite in DC when he actually votes. Like, hey, he could be here and say, I care about seniors, but then goes and votes to cut Meals on Wheels. Right? He'll say he cares about veterans, but then cuts veterans benefits. It's highlighting those things for people and letting them know, look, this guy is lying to you, and let me show you how he's lying to you. And then the best thing is, like, we're not embellishing anything. These are the actual votes. These are the votes he's taken to cut these programs. These are the votes to, when he says, like, oh, if he's pretending to be moderate, but then he's going to support some MAGA extremists like Representative Jordan or Representative Johnson. Like, you see his votes there. You know what I mean? He can't say one thing back home and then do the exact opposite in DC. And I think it's really just showing voters that and letting them know, like, look, this guy is saying one thing, but doing the complete opposite of what he's telling you.
Got it. So you basically want to make the case that he's playing you, right? Mm-hmm. He's the guy that you see is not the guy that's doing things back in Washington. And in fact, your website leads with an ad. At the time, McCarthy was the speaker, right? So you're tying Valadao to McCarthy there. And it sounds like you're going to continue to do that. On the reverse side, one of the things that was happening last time in all of the 6 purple districts, and to you as well, was the Republicans were just spending a lot of money on vicious lies. There's no other way to say it, right? There were a lot of ads that were just completely untrue, but also apparently had an effect, depending on who you talk to, that they were pretty hard to overcome. What's your strategy for managing that? Because obviously he's going to do the same thing this time that he did last time, and that's kind of their playbook.
I think this early engagement is very key, right? Starting to build that rapport and that trust early. Like I said, if we can break down those barriers and they actually trust you as individuals, then, then they start believing you more, because then, we're not lying to them. We're actually showing them the real evidence. And I think the sooner that we do that, all these early engagements, that's laying the foundation so that when they do hear those attack ads and those lies, they'll be like, oh no, I already read about this, or oh, they've already told me about this. I already know what the truth is, right? And then they could take it with a grain of salt. Then anything else that they say, they just say, oh, that's just that political muck and they're just lying. One of the things that we could do too is, I was telling my campaign last time, what we need to do more is probably use like, some of the editorials or some of the articles from our local trusted papers and show like, oh, actually, this is what Rudy did. Right. And then this is what he didn't do. And show people like, look, this is from years ago. All of a sudden in this election year, they're trying to say the exact opposite. Look, they're trying to play you again. Kind of what you were saying earlier, Tom, right? They're trying to play you, but look, this is what really happened, right? And showing them like, oh, okay. And I think when you show them things that verify it with trusted sources, and hopefully all of our volunteers, especially if we engage early, are becoming those trusted sources, then that's going to help us move that needle, right? And it's going to help us cut through all that noise so that we get those votes to turn out, and that we get to cut through all of that super PAC money and all that dirty money that comes into these campaigns and all those lies that are being told.
Got it. So I'm hearing a couple of things. One is establishing that theme of dishonesty, that he's being dishonest with you about his votes. He's being dishonest with you also about how he characterizes me and about the things that he says that I've done or haven't done, right? And I've got the receipts for it. So you want to ask me, I can show you. It's right here. But the other thing that I think I heard was, you mentioned earlier the importance of knowing that you're genuine and you're having conversations with people and really kind of deputizing in a way all of the folks working for you to have those conversations on your behalf, right? To bring that same honesty and forthrightness.
I tell my volunteers all the time, find something that you're passionate about. So for instance, like I have some teacher volunteers that come in, they're like, I was like, talk about education. That's what you love. It's going to come across at the door, right? And talk about like what I've done with the community college or what I've done at the high schools, what I've done at the universities. Like, you could talk about all of these things. It doesn't matter which walk of life you're in. Like I can actually, going back to your receipts, I can point to receipts, real things that we've accomplished in all of these communities and in the Central Valley, but actually have real concrete things. So it doesn't matter which industry you're involved in, whether it's the environment, whether it's engineering, whether it's the schools, whether it's clean drinking water, like, healthcare, like I have things to point to and you can be like, look, here's the receipts. Now you can look at David Valadao. So for instance, like David Valadao likes to talk about water and infrastructure, but yet when he had a chance to vote on the infrastructure bill, he voted no. Right. And now that money is coming into the district, now we're going to see if he's going to try to claim credit for some of this stuff that he just voted against. Right. And it's us highlighting those things to say like, oh, no. You can't claim credit for something you were completely opposed to, that you actually voted no on, And so I think it's just highlighting those things for my opponent and then saying like, actually, Rudy, whether you're walking in the city of Delano, brought that clean drinking water well, right? Or the city of Corcoran, or wherever you're at, you could be like, no, that well exists there because that's what he fought for. Here's the receipt, right? And I think it's doing those types of things.
Right, exactly. And you've got that, a 10-year record of delivering for the Valley. And I remember that from our conversation last year. That's really a key part of your campaign. And I think, the priorities that you list on your website echo that as well. I'm wondering also, though, in California, as we've noted, and as you've agreed, as well as in New York last year, we did see a bit of a red wave, mostly because of depressed Democratic turnout. But that wasn't the case all across the country. There were, purple states where Democrats turned out in force, and actually we had blue waves in those parts of the country. And it kind of seems like part of the difference there was that voters in those areas didn't feel as safe, that they felt that they were more at risk from the MAGA agenda that was threatening them, that, might take away the right for a woman to choose her own reproductive health care in her state. And that Californians and New Yorkers didn't feel that as intensively as intensely. Does that change at all kind of your approach? Because it's one thing to say I'm able to do these things for you, Um, but is there an element now also of needing to let people know these are the stakes? This is, no matter what's going on at the state legislature, if Republicans really gain control across the board, there's not a whole lot I can do to protect you, right?
Yeah,
So
correct. And I think, whatever issue that is, that's true across the entire board. But let's look at a woman's right to choose right here in California and New York. Yeah, we've enshrined those in our California Constitution, but that's not to say that there won't be a challenge that if Republicans run the tables and gain Congress and gain the White House, that they wouldn't use, say, for instance, the supremacy clause, right, to actually overturn anything that the states are doing. So it's letting people know, like, look, these are the stakes. Like, why do we even want to go down that road when we could make that difference now? And we could actually stand up for ourselves, stand up for women, stand up for their choices and for their families. And you could do something about it right now, right? And the way you do that is turning in your ballot. The way you do that is getting your family to vote. The way you do that is talking to your neighbors to say why this is important. And so cutting through that apathy and saying, no, this is, really the most important election probably in your history. This is a pivotal moment in, I believe, American democracy with everything that we're seeing on the extremes. And so you need to be engaged, because 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, when somebody asks you, what did you do during that pivotal moment in American history? Did you just stay at home and not do anything? Or did you participate? Did you actually walk on the weekends? Did you write postcards? Did you make phone calls? Did you donate money? Did you actually vote? Right? You should have that answer for your kids and your grandkids.
and what are the issues that voters in your district are talking to you about? Are they concerned now about the Republicans in the House and some of the stuff they're doing, or is that a case that you have to make for them, or are there other things that are more top of mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's they'll read headlines but not understand exactly what's going on, right? So explaining the headlines to them, but also at the end of the day too, I tell them it's pocketbook issues, right? Pocketbook issues about the costs. So, like, I always highlight insulin because we have high diabetic rates here in the Valley. And so I was like, look, Democrats are trying to help you save money by capping the price of insulin, right? So you could get the life-saving medications that you want. The other side is not, right? And I think it's just highlighting those things about, like, how it affects you and your family, but how it affects your pocketbook as well, and highlighting those types of things. I think that's what we need to continue to do. Those are the issues that people do talk to me about. When I get approached, like, I always get approached at Costco. I always say I get approached at Costco for some reason. People aren't shy about giving me their opinions, but whether I'm at Costco or whether I'm at a local community event or out at the park, people will be like, oh my gosh, like, these are my costs. They always feel like they're one paycheck away from being broke. They're one medical visit away from being broke, one family emergency away from being broke, one family tragedy from being broke. And those are the types of things. So they want to know, like, okay, so what are we doing to help them? And so, I'll bring up the things like making healthcare more affordable and accessible, increasing Social Security, right? So that they can actually live and pay their bills and not have to worry about food on their tables. It's talking to them about those things and how the Democrats as a party and how us as a candidate are trying to make their lives better and more accessible.
Yeah. So really the things that affect them day to day are what you're hearing the most about, and then you're tying that to what's being done for them or is being withheld from them, right, in the case of the Republican House right now. One of the issues that I've read is a hot button topic in your district right now is gas prices. And one of the priorities on your website says that we should be ramping up domestic energy production. And at the same time, I know that younger voters pretty much across the board are extremely concerned about the climate crisis, which you don't mention explicitly on your website. And so how do you balance that, the worries about gas prices, for example, with concerns from younger voters about the need to quickly shift to renewables?
Yeah, no, and I talk to voters all the time, and I'm a professor at the local university, so the students bring it up to me also. But I also tell them, and one of the things that people don't know when we talk about the receipts is I was actually the author of the California Economic Resiliency Fund. right? So the SURF funding actually started in my legislation, and then we put it into the California budget. It was $750 million, and now it's grown to over $1 billion to actually move us towards a sustainable future. And so, I talk about that type of stuff. And when we look at, for me, it's all about jobs and making sure that people can put food on the table for their families. So, if you want to take an engineer that's working at, ERA, for instance, or one of the companies, and, what are you doing to actually help them transition into more economically, environmentally viable industry? And so whether you're looking at things like carbon capture or any new technology where they could actually still have a six-figure job, then that's what we're doing, right? And it's putting the resources where your mouth is what I say. And, and I tell the governor, like, look, I will be with you at the ribbon cuttings, but we just need to make sure that families are taken care of. And so, we got to continue to do this, but we can't do it like overnight. You can't snap your fingers and all of a sudden this is done. But we need to have a transition plan, and we need to move towards actually moving to that future. And that's why the legislation that I actually authored and then was subsequently passed is a pathway to do that type of stuff. And so, we've broken the state up into regions because we know that every region has unique challenges and has unique opportunities. And so we've been able to do that, and we'll continue to keep pushing on that front. And so, when I talk to a lot of younger voters, they're definitely on board with that and understand. They're like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's what we're doing. And I'm like, and they didn't know that there was this huge investment in it. And I'm like, yeah, no, this is something real that we're kind of moving forward to in the future. But at the same time, it's not cutting a lot of people off.
Got it. So really managing the transition, making sure that people are able to transition and still provide for their families,
Right.
Keep good paying jobs. So you mentioned that you're teaching, and nationally younger voters have been one of the key factors in Democratic victories, maybe the factor that's made the difference in a number of races. What are you doing to appeal to them, to register them, and to get them out to vote?
I see it in my classrooms. I tell them all the time, how many of you guys voted? And, a handful of them will raise their hand. And then I said, if I did the same meeting, with a bunch of older folks, they would all tell me they would like practically all raise their hand. And I was like, so some of the key things that I talk about is the Supreme Court decisions, whether it's Dobbs or whether it's affirmative action, any of these court cases that have happened in the last couple of years. What I do is make it relevant to them and to their lives. And I say, look, if you agree or don't agree with this policy, know that this happens because of the Supreme Court. Now, who appoints the Supreme Court? President, right? And if you didn't vote for president or you didn't vote for Congress, all of these policies, like student debt, especially for my students, like if you care about these issues, you need to vote. Because if not, somebody else is voting for you. And when I tell them somebody else is voting for them because they're not voting and their opinion's counting more than theirs, then they get riled up.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just making younger voters aware of like why this impacts them and doing the tie. So I do that a lot in my classroom. Is I'll talk about a case from 15, 20 years ago, but then bring it back to like, whether we're talking about Dobbs, like in the last 2 years, right? Or even affirmative action earlier this year, and say, look, this is happening to you today. And this is why it matters to you today. So then I ask them, how many of you are going to vote now? Right. And then they all start raising their hands because they're like, no, it actually makes a difference. And so I think it's just really engaging younger voters and telling them this is how it's affecting you and this is how it's going to affect you in the future.
Yeah. And making that case broadly, I guess, across the whole district. Mm-hmm. And are you seeing some uptick there? You said when you have that conversation in class, you're seeing a real response
in my classes
across the district as well?
Yeah, definitely in my classes. As we start engaging more and more with voters as we get closer to March and the primary, and then obviously the big prize in November, we'll see how that continues to resonate or how we fine tune that message. But we know that younger voters typically are aligned more with the Democratic Party, even if they're not exactly registered as Democrats, because we know that no party preference continues to grow. But we know that on the issues and on the policies, on the values, that they definitely lean more towards the Democrats. And we see that in the statistics and we see that in voting patterns. So the more that we can do to engage them and to bring them on board and get them to turn in their ballots is only going to bode well for Democrats, not just here in this state, but I think across the entire country as well. And so I know that the Secretary of State is doing this program where she's going out to high schools to make sure that we're doing the pre-registration where they can pre-register at 16. And so, we've been in touch with them to see if we could do some of those programs here in the 22nd district as well, and trying to engage them, especially as the election gets closer. Obviously the kids will, I say kids, but the young adults, the younger students, as they see it more and more in the news, they become more and more engaged. And so we're hoping, to kind of get that synergy and get them for the younger ones registered, pre-registered, but the ones that are turning 18 before November to make sure that they're there. But even anybody under 30 to be like, look, it's worth the 15 minutes for you to fill out your ballot. And you guys know the reasons why, because I could tell you that just the voter apathy for the people that say, oh, I'll get to it and then never do, like that's the difference in these elections, right? So if you care about these issues, that's the difference in these elections, is whether you take the 15 minutes to fill this out.
Yeah. A few minutes ago, you mentioned the Supreme Court, and they have become, in the last several years, a direct threat to the power of Congress and to the power of the executive branch in many ways. And you've mentioned some of them. When you get to Congress, what needs to be done? What actions do you support or would you take to address both the corruption and some of the decisions that the Supreme Court's MAGA justices have been making?
Yeah, I mean, I look forward to working with the caucus to actually talk about an ethics, right? A code of ethics like we have for congressional members, that we have for a lot of our governmental appointees. Like, why don't we have this for the Supreme Court? That needs to, in my opinion, needs to happen, right? But also understanding that the Supreme Court is there to interpret the laws. And if we need to go back and redefine the law the way it needs to be defined to not allow some of these interpretations, then let's go back and do that. I feel that as Democrats, sometimes when we control the government, there's hesitancy. And I would say, like, there shouldn't be any hesitancy. We should actually go and execute our values and our morals, because we know that when the other side has control, they never ask us how we feel about things, right? We just need to go and do the right things for Americans and get that done. And then leave no wiggle room for the Supreme Court to misinterpret the intention of congressional law.
Yeah. Great. Unless efforts to actually apply the 14th Amendment are successful, Trump is going to be on the ballot next year, and which is horrible in its own way, but also will change the dynamics probably of the race in many ways. When you talk to voters, are they concerned about that threat and the MAGA extremism that's kind of on his coattails? Are they talking to you about that at all?
I haven't heard anybody bring up the 14th Amendment specifically, unless they're referencing a news article, and that's mostly with my political friends.
Yeah, right? I wasn't thinking so much about the 14th, but just about Trump and the threat of Trump.
Yeah, it's more about the policies. Right. So I know that out in some of the community events, people ask me questions, for instance, when Trump had talked about doing away with natural born citizenship, for instance, right? And that's part of the amendments during the Civil War, right? And so when they heard that, they were like, wait, so if my kid is born here and I'm not, they're not a citizen? And I said, yeah, no, that's what they're talking about on the other side, is to get rid of that. And then you see their eyes just kind of wide open, like, oh my God. And I think it's just letting people know, like, look, these are the policies that they're talking about on the extreme. And if you don't get involved and you don't engage and vote, when you have the right to vote, like these are the things that we're going to be subject to as Americans, right? These constitutional crises where we're going to have that they're going to want to change. And so that's, to me, I use that as an opportunity to tell them, this is how it affects you. This is how it affects your family. You're bringing this issue to me, but if you're really concerned about it, don't just be concerned about it, do something about it and vote. And you're doing something about it is voting and talking to your family and friends to vote. Right? We need to turn with our concern into action.
And it sounds like doing that in part by finding the key issues that are the most threatening to them that they may not know about. Trump's usually giving them like half a dozen every night these days, right? If you actually tune in, there, we're going to toss these people out, or you can't come in if you don't have our religion, or whatever it might be, flavor of the 24-hour cycle. But making those salient for people and letting them know this is really what you're up against. Rudy, we've got like just a minute more, but I want to give you a chance to say anything else maybe that I didn't have the wisdom to ask you, or any kind of closing comments that you have for the group.
Okay, no, I just want to say thank you guys for doing this and for being involved and engaged. I tell people I love the Margaret Mead quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but never underestimate the power of what a small group can do, right? And it's us coming together to do those things, to be the leaders in our communities, to, you guys coming together and identifying these 6 districts to say, look, guys, this is where we can control what happens in the House, and really what controls what happens with the country. And what happens in Congress and the country actually has effects worldwide. So, your ability to identify this, but to actually engage and to help with all of the things that need to get done, whether it's messaging, whether it's phone calls, whether it's postcards, whether it's raising money, because things just cost a ton of money. All those things matter and they make a difference. And I just want to say thank you guys for doing that, and know that we'll continue to fight the good fight. And I got tough skin to keep taking on the lies and to do all these things, but at the end of the day, the way I'm able to do that is because I know that I have the backing and the support of so many good Democrats, right? And the backing and support of so many friends, because they believe in our mission. They believe in actually helping our families, believe in helping Californians, believe in helping Americans and doing what's right, no matter what the extremists say, that we're just going to go out and do the right thing for people. And so, like I tell people, my simple quote, just do the most amount of good for the most amount of people. And that's what you guys are doing. And so I just appreciate your efforts and appreciate you guys highlighting these districts and highlighting CA-22 as a part of that package. And just know I appreciate what you're doing, and collectively we're the difference. Collectively, we are the difference. And I'm hoping that in November, like collectively, we're going to get those 2 extra votes in every neighborhood that we need to put this across the finish line and win the House, right? That's what all of the national articles are like. Look, CA-22 paves the way for the House. If we don't win the seat, we don't win the House. That's what we saw last year. But if we win this seat, then, the prospects for us winning the House is extremely high. And so I just want to say thank you guys.